So no sound effects are being played from the Unity instance of this game. It's all what we hear from the game running right here, so... Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'll be teaching you how to synchronize sound effects over the network using Photon. And although this video is specifically designed for the FPS tutorial series, really if you have any kind of multiplayer game using Photon Pun, this video should be pretty handy, as we'll go over everything from synchronizing sound effects in animations to synchronizing gunshot sounds and stuff like that in 3D. So let's get right into it. Now, just for you guys, I put together a free bundle of FPS game sound effects, which you can find in the description below. So you'll download something like this, extract it, there we go, and you can just drag this folder into your project, and you get some nice bass sound effects, such as gunshots, shotguns, snipers, reloads, and different shell casings, which is awesome. Now, if you're not making an FPS game, or you want other sound effects that aren't here, a cool free resource is called freesound.org, and here you can search for any sound you like for free. So let's say we want a sci-fi gun, and as you can see, there's hundreds of different sound effects to choose from. So yeah. So let's get started with a footstep sound. I think this will do, so let's download it. And we can drag it in, and I'll name it Footstep. And I guess the first thing we'll do is synchronizing footstep sounds from our player walking for all players in our lobby. So let's go to our player. And the first thing we're going to do is on our root game object, where we have the player setup, we'll add a new component, and we'll call this player Photon sound manager. So first we'll add a public audio source, and we'll call this footstep source, and we'll add a public audio clip, and we'll call this footstep sound effect. And here let's add a public void called play footstep sound effects, and in here we'll do footstep source dot clip equals footstep sound effect, and then we'll do footstep source dot play. Now we'll do a bit more in between here eventually, such as adjusting the pitch and volume, but we'll get to that in a second. So now let's set this up in our animation and inside of our player. So in our player, right click, create an empty, and we'll call this audio source holder, and we can just center it, and under that we'll create an empty game object, and we'll call this footstep source, and make sure it's centered nicely on your player. Click add a component, and we'll add an audio source component, and this will be the point from which our footstep is played. Now we want to change this to be 3D, and we're going to change the 3D sound settings. So right now the max distance at which this sound effect can be heard is 500 meters, which is quite far. So let's change this to something like 30 meters. And that should be pretty appropriate because you can't really hear sound effects from that far away. But you'll still be able to tell where it's coming from because the audio source is set to be 3D. Now let's assign our footstep source into a player Photon sound manager and also assign our footstep sound effects. Now we need some way of triggering our play footstep sound effects function, and we'll do this from within a walking animation so that we can time it with the different parts of the animation. So go to your animation window by pressing Ctrl or Command 6, or going to Window Animation, and create a new animation called Walk. And let's begin animating. Go a few frames forward, go to the Transform tool, and let's rotate it down and to the left. Then I'll rotate it up and more to the left, so it makes a kind of U shape with the tip of the gun. And then copy and paste the second frame and copy and paste the first frame. And now we have a loop. And we can stretch this out so the animation is a bit longer. And just like that, we now have a full walk animation. Now let's time the sound effects. Now we want the footstep sound effect to be played twice in this animation, and it'll be timed to both of the low points where the gun is tilting down. But first, let's play this animation when our player is walking. So in your movement script, add a new header for our animation, and let's add a public animation called hand animation, a public animation clip called hand walk animation. Now we want to be playing this clip when our player starts walking, so in our fixed update function, when input.magnitude is greater than 0.5, we'll do hand animation.clip equals hand walk animation, and then we'll do hand animation.play. Now we can copy this, and we need a second animation for our idle animation, so let's create that. And this animation will be for when we're not walking at all. So in this animation, change the rotation to 1 and then 0 on the x-axis, so it creates a new keyframe, and just copy and paste it to about 1 second forward. And let's make the hands tilt down slightly. And there we go, we have a nice subtle bobbing animation for our idle animation. And let's add this to our movement script as a new animation clip called idle animation. And we want to play this if we're not jumping, and our input.magnitude is not greater than 0.5, which implies that we're idle down here. And we'll just copy and paste this code, and instead of hand walk animation, we'll pass in idle animation, like so. Now just make sure to reference all of these in your movement script. So reference your animation, your idle animation, and your walk animation, like so. Now for both the walk and idle animation, we want these to loop. So select them and change the wrap mode to loop. And we also want to make sure that they work with the old animation components. So select the animation, click on these 3 dots, click debug, and make sure that legacy is ticked on both of these. Cool. Make sure to disable the main camera, and let's just test the animation really quick. So as you can see, whenever we start moving, we play the walk animation. Now let's add some sound effects. So in our walk animation, we want to play a footstep twice in this animation, and that corresponds to both these low points, right here and right here, when it's in the bottommost part of the animation. And we could do this programmatically, manually calculating the timings, but Unity actually has a system which is much better, which we can utilize. So on the same game object that we have the animation on, we're going to add a new component, and we're going to call this send animation event to sound effects manager. And at the top, it's going to take in a public player Photon Sound Manager, and we'll call it player Photon Sound Manager, like so. And it'll have a public void called trigger footstep sound effects. And you can't make it take any parameter in here. And in here, we'll do player Photon Sound Manager dot play footstep sound effect. Now we're going to trigger this from inside of our animation. So head on over to your animation window and go to your walk animation. And on this low point, we're going to add a new event. And for the function, we're going to pass in our trigger footstep sound effects function, and then add a second one on the other low point that triggers our footstep sound effects, like so. Now in our send animation events to sound effects manager, drag in your sound effects manager, and now when the event is called, it'll cause our main Photon sound effects manager to play the footstep. So if you try this out, now this is pretty awesome, but the footsteps sound really repetitive, and that is because we're only playing one footstep sound over and over. So to fix this, we can randomize the pitch and volume of the footstep. So we'll set footstep source dot pitch equals unity engine dot random dot range, and in here we specify a minimum value and a maximum value, and the default pitch is a pitch of 1. So we want to set random values around that. So I'll type in 0.7 and 1.2. And for the volume, we can do a range between something like 0.2 F and 0.35. And of course we'll play. So let's test this out right now. This is a similar system to what Minecraft uses. And it sounds a lot better. Now obviously you could replace this footstep sound with your own, and I challenge you to find a way to randomly choose between multiple footstep sound effects using this, which would improve it even further. Now on to syncing it for multiple players. So to do this, we're going to use the RPC system. And we're going to add a new function called public void play footstep sound effect underscore RPC. And what an RPC is it's a function that's executed for all other players over the network. And what we want to do is to play this footstep for all other players over the network. So let's just copy this code and paste it in here. And on this player Photon Sound Manager, since it's attached to a player, which also has a Photon view attached to it right here, we'll do get components, Photon view, dot RPC, and I'll pass in the name of this RPC right here. And I'll do RPC target dot all, like so. And now if you test this, this will be synced over the network. Awesome. Now on to synchronizing our gun shooting sound effect. So in our player sound manager, let's add a new public audio source called gun shoot source. And we'll add a public audio clip array called all gun shoot sound effects. And we'll add a new function called public void play shoot sound effect, and it'll take in an integer for our index, and we'll add a new pun RPC, and we'll call it public void play shoot sound effect RPC, and it will also take in an int for index, since we're also trying to play this sound effect for all players. And we can sort of copy this logic and paste it in here, except changing this footstep source from footstep source to gunshot source, and from footstep sound effects to all gunshot sound effects. And from this array, we want to specifically play the gunshot which has a specified index, so we'll pass that in here. And let's just replace this here and here. And in here we obviously want to call this RPC, so we'll do get component photon view .rpc, and it'll be called play shoot sound effects RPC, RPC target.all, and we'll pass in this index parameter right here. Since it's a parameter of this function, here we had no parameter, so we don't pass in anything, and we'll add a semicolon. Now we want to call this from our gun script. So in our weapon, under here, we'll add a new header called sound effect, and we'll do public int shoot sound effect index, and we can set this to 0. And we're going to add a public player photon sound manager called player photon sound manager. And in our fire function right here, we'll do player photon sound manager dot play shoot sound effect, and we'll pass in the shoot sound effect index of this gun. Now we have two guns, say the first gun has a shoot sound effect index of 0, and the second one will have one of 1, and make sure to drag in the photon sound manager for both, like so. And we obviously need to set this up in our player sound manager. So for a gun shoot source, let's duplicate our footstep source and rename it shoot source. And we can increase the max distance to something like 60, since you can hear a gunshot from much further away than a footstep. And let's drag it in right here. And for our shoot sound effects, let's drag in our sound effects for our guns. So we can drag in our AK, shotgun, and sniper. Let's say your second weapon is a sniper, so you would pass in an index of 3 to play this sound effect. If it was an AK, you'd pass in index of 0 to play this sound effect, etc. And yeah, let's test this out. And this is pretty awesome, so let's test this out in multiplayer and just make sure that it's synced over the network as we expected. Now obviously we'll hear it for both players since I'm running them at the same time, but you should be able to hear the sound effects being played twice, which indicates that it's working. So let's do a shoot. You know what, we can actually mute this guy. So no sound effects are being played from the Unity instance of this game. It's all what we hear from the game running right here. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button below and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.